Happy Sunday, everyone. Hello. Tell me how my mic sounds. I listened to Friday's show. I didn't like it. I think it was too close to me, and I heard crinkling. I'm very particular with my sound and my tech. I might need a new mic. Hold on. Every time I start a show, my husband texts. Hold on. He's so funny, calls it a meeting. Are you in a meeting? Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. Hi, Side-Eye Jess. The sun is shining. Guess what? I've been in my command center. Okay, back up. Hi, everyone. I'm Cyberchick. This is my command center. I've been in it all day. I'm thrilled to have you here. Hi, my niece Elizabeth, and my sister and Rhonda, Maggie, Nina. I love it. My mod Side Eyes. Just blame it on my wild. I love you all. Thank you for joining. It's so nice when I have people here, especially when politics is the topic. I'm so scared. So first of all, let's just say I've been in my office all day because I had to do tax preparation and upload all my tax documents, which I just hate doing it. And I don't know why I hate doing it. I just hate doing it. So sunny greetings from Florida. Hi, Brandy. So I've got 2 coffees. I've got a Icelandic lime seltzer in my water. Because the longer I stay up here, my husband just keeps throwing drinks at me. I don't know why. Hi, J401. So one of the things that I like to do on Sundays, and it's so funny, remember how we used to watch, I don't watch TVs or talk shows anymore, but I do my own investigation. And I'm a new YouTube channel. I started in October. I wanted to raise awareness for the cult that my niece was in. We got her out safely. And then I started to incorporate other programs. And I think I've proven to my chat. I have 1,200 subscribers, and I appreciate all of you. I try to stay out of the gossip and the drama. So I'm not doing a political show for anything other than facts. So while I'm going on my journey to find data and facts, I just thought I would share it with you. And I feel like it's polarizing in this country right now. Freeze frame, pan out, loves political chit chats. Well, why am I so nervous about it? Because I feel like even within my own house, my husband doesn't really want to talk politics, and we're aligned politically. We're aligned with our values. It's become so taboo that people don't want to discuss it. So I'm going to do so respectfully. Hi, Grammy72. And I'm going to do it as a way of educating everybody. And I will be completely honest with you. I hate the term, raging liberal, and I hate the negative connotation with extreme Republicans. I think I'm a moderate. I am registered as an independent. I do lean to intend to vote more Democratic. I do. But I have voted for Republicans, and one of my favorite governors of Massachusetts was Charlie Baker. So what I always try to do is gather the facts. And today, doesn't it feel like you've got the Democrats, the Republicans, and then you've just got extremists? This is my point of view. And maybe I'm wrong. And if we can have this respectful dialogue here, and if any of you have a channel or you disagree with me or you can point me to reasonable, intelligent people, we can have them on as well. Because really, it's all about respectful dialogues. And Nita Canadian says, I appreciate a political discussion. It is the foundation of our education. And I think we've lost that. And in some cases, I think that it's flipped, and I'm worried. Okay, so I'm taking a step back. We're going to chill out. It's a Sunday. I had my family over. My boys and my daughter-in-law came over yesterday to celebrate me and my birthday. We had pizza. We had salad. We sat around the dining room table. We did not talk politics, but we talked about life, and it felt good. It refueled my soul, because it always does. And then I started researching the SAVE Act that we'll talk about, and I just had some concerns about it. And I tend to get emotional sometimes. So I thought, okay, back up, Cheryl. Let's just look at the facts and the data. So I think a lot of us are in the same boat. My fear is the lack of communication that we have with each other and with the extended world is going to be perceived as acceptance, tolerance, or just putting our head in the sand. And then all of a sudden, we are in a situation that we don't know how we got there. So we're just going to talk. I am going to share a a YouTube that I love, and I'm going to just hopefully it's something that you'll get some value out of. And let me see if I want to go right there. I'm thinking. So you have gossip, right? And that gossip's fine. Everyone likes to gossip. And then you have speculation, and that's fine too. And then you have facts. So I'll point out when it's facts, gossip, or speculation. And that way we can have a little fun with it too. So let's just look at these people who have joined me. LH Traveler, thank you so much. I appreciate a respectful conversation. I'm in the middle, although I'm a registered Republican. My parents were Republicans, and they actually brought us up to just be independent thinkers. You know, I tend to lean fiscally conservative, but socially liberal. So I am really caught in the middle. And I tend to look at, I dig under the covers for myself to see what the facts are. So I could not talk to my mother-in-law. God rest her soul. We lost her last summer. But you would walk in and Fox News was blaring on the TV and there was no other point of view and no other, and she was 93. I wasn't going to argue with her, right? I'm not going to do that. Metallicat, I like this. I see so many friends splitting hate from hate. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of hate out there about whose side you are on. And if I listen to people, I am concerned that they're not looking at, the actual facts. And when I say facts, I'm like, what is, what's the United States Constitution? That's like the supreme law of the United States, okay? The structure is there to protect the people, right? To protect the rights of citizens. And this ties into me always harping on the First Amendment and how important the First Amendment is to us. And that is why, Turnboy, if you're out there, get the fuck on my show so we can have this type of conversation, because how we even know what's going on is by our journalists. And we're going to listen to someone that she's actually, I don't know, I'll introduce her in her background. But, we have the Constitution, we have the three branches of government, and it's all checks and balances, right? It's all to make sure that one branch doesn't become too powerful and doesn't scam the people. It's all about individual rights, speech, religion, press, bearing arms, protection. And I'm afraid that some of them might be at risk, but I'm not sure. So, and it matters because you don't want to live in a state where the government controls everything, right? So it's all about protecting our civil liberties. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the Constitution. And I think that Heather does a really good job at that. Okay, so we're gonna see how the chat is doing on this Sunday. You guys are so great. Oh, so back to me. I had a birthday celebration yesterday, taxes this morning. This is my just rest time and going to the casino tonight. That's gonna be fun. I'm really looking forward to that. Nina Canada says we don't have to register with a political party in Canada. We can be members of a party, but it's private. Yeah, privacy is missing in the USA. J401, the more extreme either side goes, they end up becoming the same. Think of the shape of a horseshoe. Yeah, I'm just worried though that it feels different to me. And again, if you don't like what Heather has to say, I don't think anyone will be offended. She's brilliant, right? Isn't it great to listen to smart people? If we have the equivalent on the Republican side, and actually, is she a liberal? I think she is a liberal. She's about democracy. Okay, I've gone there. So let me just introduce what I have on Heather, because I'm going to read. I looked her up, so I'm going to read a little bit about Heather. I follow Heather. I told you I have a journalist for every single area of my life, like entertainment, world news, politics. Heather Cox Richardson is an American historian. She's an author, a professor, best known for her historical work on 19th century US history. She teaches right now at Boston College, where she focuses on the American Civil War reconstruction. She's super smart. See, I don't have time. I fight cyber criminals. I don't have time to get into the nuances of, and I've never studied politics. So I look for people who have, who are really smart. I started following Heather because she was writing letters from American in 2019. Every single day, she writes a newsletter. Every day, called Letters from an American. And what she does is she takes current political events and she writes about them through the lens of US history. I find it fascinating and I find it relatable. So it's one of the most widely read newsletters on Substack. I don't read it through Substack. I subscribe to her. So again, it's Heather Cox Richardson. I'll put her name in the chat. She has a podcast, and really, I started tuning in probably 6 months ago, and I don't listen to her as much as I really should. So she is, progressive in her public commentary. I think you'll like her though, because she does a really good job because she's an academic historian professor. Her writing and her analysis are just, for me, easy to consume. Anyone know her? Do you guys know her? And you can also drop in the chat who you listen to, because I want to learn, right? I want to learn from you. You're here, you're going to learn from me. Funeral lady, love that you're talking about this. I was literally commenting on a friend's post today about how we need more conversations about meeting in the middle and not ending relationships over politics. Funeral lady, I'm concerned that we're not talking about it. I actually think the majority of the majority of us are in the same boat, and there's just a few extremists. And okay, this goes back to some research that I'm doing on the Epstein files, which we won't talk about today, but I will talk about it at another shortly, another live. The common theme is not whether they're Republicans, not whether they're Democrats or independents. They're powerful. A lot of this comes down to power and money. And that leaves the rest of us out, and it leaves the rest of us in their hands, and I don't like it. So I'm nervous about it. Yeah. Hey, Rebecca, I saw you. Heather Cox Richardson is amazing, isn't she? So I was listening to her, Rebecca, and I thought, I wonder if I could share this. And my immediate thought was, oh my gosh, no, your new YouTube channel, they're going to tear you apart. Because we're seeing that online with trolls who don't like what you have to say or who you associate with. But then I thought, well, what do I care? I'm going to do it because it's what's important to me. And I feel like it's an important conversation to have. Prince of Wales, our ally, is not in the chat. He's not watching us. And I do want to say, because I hear from some people who are new to YouTube, if you are afraid to comment in people's chats because you're not sure how to do it, where to find it, or what to do, you comment here. Just say hi to us because we're very friendly. Well, we're friendly before I start my my political conversation. So I think we will begin now with Heather. A few words from Heather. Actually, this is like an hour long, but just so you know, I'm going to stop. We're going to talk about it. This is just her thoughts of what's been happening. She did this yesterday. I listened to it when I was walking Prince. Her thoughts of what's going on in the past couple of weeks. And I'm stalling because I don't know if this is going to offend people, but let's just, if there's things that you disagree with or that you have questions about, just ask away. LH Traveler leading it off with, may I ask everyone's opinion on why so many people hate Donald Trump? I can only speak for myself. His values and morals and decision-making process do not align with mine. and the way he treats people in the press, in real life is something that offends me. I'm only speaking for myself. So, okay. Freeze frame is like, "Get it, do it, do it." Okay, here we go. We're adding it to the stage. Here she is. She's phenomenal.
Listen, I've got a lot to cover today, so I'm just going to jump into this. I will tell you, I probably will, I always go on longer than I'm supposed to anyway, and I will probably do the same thing today. So let's get started on it because what I really wanted to do, and the reason I was unhappy not to be able to be on yesterday, was because I wanted to draw a bigger picture of what's going on in this moment, both in the United States and around the globe, in a way that I hope will help you make sense of some of the stuff happening. I don't know about you, but it often feels to me like, I always talk about the light, bright theory of history, but it often feels to me like there's so many little individual things going on. It's hard to see a bigger picture. And I do think those little things going on do make up a larger picture. And it helps to see that larger picture in order to see where you feel like you want to put pressure, things you would like to see change. So obviously, I'm not going to cover everything today, but I am going to try and put into some kind of perspective many of the big stories that have happened for the last week. All right. On that end, let me start with the whistleblower complaint, the one I called your attention to. Now, of course, I've lost track of time. I think it was early in the month of February, um, in which it became clear from a report in the Wall Street Journal that Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the Director of National Intelligence is supposed to interface among the many different intelligence organizations that we have in different places around the government. She is supposed to be the person who pulls all that together. So in May of this year, it turned out that there was a whistleblower complaint that went into her office and got squelched. And the whistleblower complaint that it came out in May, the complaint went in before that, said that she had squelched it for political reasons. And this, there's a long story there. I'm not going to go into all the twists and turns about how that happened and how it came to light. But we didn't know what was in it because the day after news broke publicly that there was this whistleblower complaint hanging out there. And mind you, it had been hanging out there for like months because it was back in May, and this is now February of the following year. She released a redacted version of that, a highly redacted version to what's known as the Gang of Eight. And the Gang of Eight is quite simple. It's the top four leaders in the House and Senate, so 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and the top 4 leaders on the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. So another 4 leaders, and that's why they're the Gang of Eight. And they were created to enable Congress to always have their finger on national security issues, because especially during the Nixon administration,
Obviously, as a cybersecurity specialist, I'm always concerned about national security issues. So this was actually was the draw for me to listen to her thing yesterday. She does pivot out of this. So again, I put her YouTube channel link in the comment section. If you would sub to her, that would be great. But also, if you're interested in her, sign up for her newsletter. It's dropped into your email every single week.
The president had tried to pull a bunch of stuff by saying, well, I can't trust Congress. I can't tell Congress. So Congress created this Gang of Eight, and the Gang of Eight is generally extraordinarily secure. So they're supposed to be able to see everything. Nonetheless, this whistleblower complaint came to them highly redacted. And the reason that it was redacted was, and by the way, redacted means blacked out, so you can't see things. The reason it was redacted was because of executive privilege, which said that the president was involved somehow. So what we know now from another story in the Wall Street Journal, which has been very good on the sort of the inner workings of the Trump administration, is that it appears, and I would urge you to keep a really open mind about this, and I'll explain how and why. It appears that what the whistleblower said was that Gabbard was bottling up an interception from another country that had overheard 2 members of a different country discussing And now we know Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, as well as talking about Iran and possibly other things. Now, don't jump to any conclusions yet, in that um, raw intelligence is always raw. It could have been this was a setup. It could have been gossip. We just don't know what was in that. But it does highlight something that I wanted to call your attention to, and that is the degree to which somebody like Jared Kushner, who is not officially a member of the administration, is involved in things around the world. And it's interesting to me that Republicans like,
I think she's talked slow enough that I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. Let me know if this is annoyingly fast. We'll just do a little bit. She has a really nice, soothing voice. So hopefully I don't ruin that.
James Comer, who is the chair of the Oversight Committee in the House, kept trying to insist that Hunter Biden was very much a part of a system like this, when he really maybe was on the fringes of what I'm about to tell you, but he really is clearly not the kind of player that someone like Jared Kushner or the Trump sons are. But what this shows is this degree to which there are these deals being done or discussed that involve our power, the power of the United States of America, which is us, that we are not in, that we are not, do not have access to. Even, obviously, they're not going to come knock on yours or my door and say, hey, we're talking about doing this deal. But Congress, which represents us, is supposed to be able to look at all this stuff. And again, Congress sometimes does it right and they sometimes do it wrong. But the point is, they're supposed to represent us. And this is something where not only were they not part of what appears to have been a discussion, but also that even the whistleblower account was kept from them by a member of the administration. And that's not the only place we're seeing the use of the power of the United States in such a way that it appears to be being used to enrich people who are part of a small group that we are not invited to. And I would point to you, I believe it was only this week. This week has gone on for like a year and a half, but I would point you to Donald Trump's coming out and speaking up against the Gordie Howe International Bridge that is being constructed between Windsor, Ontario in Canada and Detroit, Michigan. And the construction of that bridge is being funded by Canada, but the bridge will be operated and owned jointly between Michigan and Canada. And it was something that was really highly popular because the competing bridge, I think it's called the Ambassador Bridge, is really, really slow. It backs up a lot, and it was really slowing down the transfer of about $300 million.
Nita Canadian and any other Canadians out there would love to get your thoughts when she's done talking about this. I didn't know about this. So this is why I listened to her, because how would I know this? I don't have time to research any of this. It's very interesting.
A day of goods across the Canadian-American border, Canadian-US border. Well, Trump in his first administration, championed this project. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he came out and said, we're not going to do this. And they kind of invented some reasons that the U.S. didn't want this bridge. Well, it turns out that the guy who operates the other bridge is a billionaire who operates the other bridge, called Howard Lutnick, who is the chair of commerce, the commerce secretary, and complained. And within an hour, or maybe it was a couple of hours, Trump came out and said publicly, well, we're not going to support this bridge, clearly doing a favor for this billionaire who called Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick, of course, is in the Epstein files after having said that he cut ties with Epstein in 2005. It turns out now he was in business with him and was friendly with him until at least 2018. So you're starting to see here this, what I'm talking about, this idea, as Josh Marshall of Talking Points Memo has described it recently, of an authoritarian international. And he uses that very deliberately. He has a doctorate in either political science or history. I always get it wrong. And I think he is using it as a takeoff of the idea of a communist international, the idea that there is this group of people who are advancing a certain kind of politics and political economy, working with each other across borders and even across interests, so long as it is imposing a certain kind of political economy on the world. And that is one in which a very small group of well-connected, extremely wealthy individuals is kind of as a world of secret deals, a world of cryptocurrency, a world in which, you can make a land deal over Gaza. There's a sort of this shadow world And it seems as if this shadow world, and Marshall's not the first one to talk about it at all. There was a really high profile piece that came out a few months ago, but I like the way he framed this, that there is this world in which these people vacation together, in which the exchange of information is crucial to sort of being able to be part of this world, and that often seems to have compromising material on each other. And as Marshall points out, it's a very stable world in a lot of ways. If everyone's got something on everybody else, then you're all kind of going through the world together.
And it's a world we're not in. Oh my gosh, the Epstein files are blowing me away. So I'm going to review just like we are here. Look, I'm not the expert on it, but I find the experts, and what I'm finding on the Epstein files, it's all they vacation together, they cover for each other, and it's despicable. And they create laws and rules to avoid accountability. And we're not part of that world, and I don't like that feeling. I don't. I don't know.
To me, it looks very much like the world of international crime that Robert Mueller described when he was the director of the FBI in a very famous speech he gave in 2011, in which he talked about how international crime was becoming what he called an iron triangle of politicians, business people, and criminals who were working to do things like corner the international market in precious metals or in oil, or working in sex trafficking or drugs, or criminal enterprises. And they were not really about religion. They worked across religions. They really weren't about nationality. They worked across nations. What they were about was garnering money and power. And I think that's a really important concept right now, because it's easy to look at the different players that we see around us, and to think, well, what does that guy have to do with this guy over here? And the answer is, I think, an attempt to override systems of democracy in order to, as I say, garner money and power in the hands of a very few people. And to do so, at least in the case of the examples like the Arab monarchies, or now Donald Trump in the United States and the people around Donald Trump, to leverage the power of the people in their states, in their countries, in order to give themselves power. I've talked a lot about turning the wealth of the United States into cash. This is sort of turning the power of the United States, its military, its economy, its culture, and leveraging it to enable the president of the United States and his cronies to make a lot of money. And that, I think, is an important way to think about some of the stories that you see around you right now. I hope that's useful. I can't actually read the comments today because I have either broken or lost all of my glasses as of today. So good luck to all of us on this one, right? Wait till you see tonight's letter. I don't know if it's going to be correctly written or not. But that brings up another set of issues that you all asked about. And that is, if you think about what I just outlined, this idea of sort of a very small group of people, and possibly an international group of people, who are trying to leverage the power of the vast majority, and I'm going to now just talk about the United States. How do you do that? I mean, how do you get the vast majority of Americans to say, oh yeah, fine, go ahead and do a secret deal with, fill in the blank? Well, partly that's disinformation, and I've talked a lot about the rise of disinformation in the United States really since the 1950s onward, taking off in the 1980s and the 1990s, and then how disinformation quite literally gets weaponized in 2015 under people like Steve Bannon, and Cambridge Analytica, and the Mercers who managed to pump social media full of memes and ideas that helped the election of Donald Trump in 2016. So I'm not going to talk more about that today. One of the other ways that you do it is what we are seeing on our streets with the rapid and violent expansion of federal agents, especially those from Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and Border Patrol. Now, again, we in the United States are frequently referring to all of those people as ICE.
So I know we're going there. And I know this is controversial. I also know that there is an immigration problem, and it does need to be addressed. I like how she frames it up, and I worry about how we're addressing it. So I just ask for everyone to just be respectful and just listen and have an open mind.
And ICE is certainly part of it. But Border Patrol, which is a subdivision of Customs and Border Protection, tends to be the more violent group. So I'm going to try and remember to call them federal agents. And that's who I mean by federal agents. And I would like to point out, as I always do, the Department of Homeland Security is brand new. It does not have the institutional history that the military does, for example. And it has a number of agents, other than the ones I just outlined, who can be deployed to work for the federal government. We tend to forget that, but there are a bunch of those people out there. Certainly not like the military or like the National Guard, but they do exist within the Department of Homeland Security. Anyway, what you are seeing with the deployment not only of those federal agents, but previously with the Marines into LA or the National Guard into a number of different places, both of which judges in courts have now said you can't do. So the administration has backed off on those. So now what you're seeing is the federal agents. What you are seeing with that is certainly an attempt to create a white nation, to terrorize people of color and Black Americans, and to force them to self-deport, that is, to give up on the idea of staying in the United States and simply turning around and going home, or to go underground, or simply to end up in detention where they're being assaulted and even killed. I've talked and will continue to talk about what are definitely concentration camps. I understand there is a bit of a misunderstanding of that, certainly in other places in the media. A concentration camp is a place where people are concentrated because a government is concerned that they present some kind of a larger law enforcement problem. And that is literally what a concentration camp is. That is not a death camp, which concentrates people deliberately to kill them. But a concentration camp is often rife, almost always actually rife with disease and with a number of other issues that do, in fact, both traumatize people and take lives. So anyway, what you're seeing with this rapid expansion of ICE and these detention centers around the country is deeply, deeply, I cannot go deep enough, problematic. Not just for the people from other countries who are being traumatized or, as I say, killed in these concentration camps, but also because it is establishing a system in the United States, an extremely well-paying system in the United States, which weds people to it because their livelihoods depend on it, of camps and of agents to feed people into those camps, which normalizes across the United States the idea of federal agents in the streets to round up those who are standing against the administration. Certainly the people most traumatized by this right now are the brown and Black people who are being rounded up by these federal agents. But ICE is not, and Border Patrol is not hanging out in the suburbs of Chicago or in the suburbs of Minneapolis because they're focusing exclusively on terrorizing brown and Black Americans. They are clearly trying to terrorize white Americans into shutting up and sitting down. That violent attempt to shut up the American population has in our past worked. If you think about the ways in which the unreconstructed white Southerners after the Civil War managed to stop the biracial movement in the South to ensure Black voting and Republican voting, Republican white voting, because remember the parties were flipped back then, they managed to put that down with paramilitary organizations, including the Ku Klux Klan, but the Ku Klux Klan was not the only one. One of the differences you're seeing today is the fact that Americans now have the ability to communicate. So they recognize that when agents show up someplace, how to get a lot of people there to make the people who are being terrorized understand that they're not alone. That was not something that was available in the post-Reconstruction South or in the Reconstruction South. But that idea of using thugs essentially to shut up the population and keep it down is what you're absolutely seeing on the streets of the United States today. Now,
that's why I'm doing the show. When I heard that, I thought, why am I not speaking about it? And I'm not even doing it in an emotional way. Just let's listen to the facts. And everything she's saying right now is facts. She will tell you when it's gossip. She will tell you when it's speculation. This is like not something you can dispute. This is what is happening right now. And honestly, everyone is being quiet and silent about it, in my opinion.
Now, this is, again, posing a huge problem right now, not obviously just for the people that are being hurt, but also for the administration, because as Americans have seen what they are doing, they have turned against it in huge numbers. So you asked about what's happening in Congress with the funding of the Department of Homeland Security. And the answer to that is that with their One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as the Republicans called the Budget Reconciliation Act that they passed in July without any Democratic votes, the Republicans poured billions and billions and billions of dollars into ICE and Border Patrol, as well as into the Department of Homeland Security. More than the militaries of most countries got funneled into those agencies and into the Department of Homeland Security. So ICE and Border Patrol are funded, pretty much fully funded, right through September 30th of 2029, all right? But when the appropriations bills for funding 2026 have been going through Congress, at first the appropriations bill that covered DHS went through the House of Representatives because the Democrats, first of all, don't have a majority, and it's a majority vote in the House, looked at it and they're like, well, ICE and Border Patrol are already funded, so there's no point in cutting the funding for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. They're the people who check you through into airports, or the Coast Guard. Those are things that Americans really want and need. So we're just going to go ahead and put those things through. Well, after the shooting and killing not just of Renee Good, but also of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, there was such an outcry that the Democrats in the Senate said, we can't possibly sign off on this. Just even symbolically, we have to take a stand against DHS, against the Department of Homeland Security. And they are able to do that and make a difference because in the Senate, because of the filibuster, which I've explained a million times, it's basically just a rule. It's just that the Senate never wrote a rule to make people stop talking. The House did in the early 19th century because it got big enough that you had to. The Senate didn't. So you essentially can stop any legislation by saying we refuse to stop talking, although we don't have a talking filibuster any longer. So you need 60 votes to get, not actually to get anything passed, simply to get to what's called cloture, which means that you can shut everybody up and go on to a vote. Never mind, not going down that rabbit hole. All right. In the Senate, because the Democrats have the ability to do that, they said, we're not going to give any more money to DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, until it cleans up its act here with regard to the way it is using ICE and Border Patrol. And the demands that the Democrats put forward are essentially to get the agents for DHS back to what they were doing before Trump took office. They're not supposed to wear masks, right? Our law enforcement in the United States does not wear masks, and they are supposed to be identified on their uniforms with, what agency they're with, what their last names are, and a unique ID number. I mean, that's just the way it's always been done. They're also supposed to use judicial warrants before breaking into somebody's homes. That is, you have to have a judge agree that there's probable cause for you to think that a crime or evidence of a crime is in that structure. And in a secret memo, lawyers for the DHS changed that under Trump to say that, in fact, you don't need a judicial warrant. You just have to have somebody else in the DHS sign off on it to say, oh, yeah, we think it's okay for you to go in there. And that is, according to virtually all of our legal history, a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which is part of our original Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And that Bill of Rights in the Fourth Amendment says that we are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures. And coming into your house by basically having one of your buddies say, yeah, I think you ought to go into that house, has always been considered an unreasonable search.
So that was a huge revelation to me. I didn't realize that it wasn't a federal judge signing these, that it was just that I didn't know that a memo was passed, or I don't know how a memo is passed. This is what I'm talking about with I have concerns about the actual Constitution in our Bill of Rights. And so in other words, the warrants are useless. I mean, I could sign one today for someone, and that was really unnerving to me, that it's not a judge, even though I guess because my thought is when it's signed off by a judge, there's evidence, there's material witness, there's witness material. I don't even know what the legal terms are, but there's information that's causing them concern. Yes, you can go and search. So the fact that I learned something. Yay, we're learning.
So the Democrats want that. They want the agencies to stop using body cameras to surveil people, to put them into a larger database, and instead use them only for accountability. They're basically things that law enforcement has always done. And the administration is so far refusing to meet them halfway. Now, interestingly enough, on that, we don't actually know what the administration has offered. That has not been made public. But whatever it is, the Democrats said ain't happening. They voted against the funding of the rest of the Department of Homeland Security. Although, again, this will not stop Border Patrol and ICE because they're funded. What it's going to do is it's going to shut down, slowly shut down, and badly hurt the federal workers who are part of FEMA, our coasties, the Coast Guard, and TSA. And I often see people saying, why did you shut down? Why don't you just shut it all down, shut down the government? Remember that there are hundreds of thousands of our neighbors who work at TSA, for example, and they will not get a paycheck. And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, people got mortgages, they got children to feed, they got, gas to put in the car.
I have coworkers in the Virginia and DC area, and the the material impact to neighborhoods after neighborhoods with the government shutdown, where these people just literally other people who have not lost their jobs are saying, "Hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Can I pick you up some milk or bread?" Trying to help out people. Imagine you're just doing going to work every day, but you're not getting paid. I don't think most of us actually, we think that a government shutdown is good because, oh, that'll get the man. It doesn't get the man. It gets all of the other men and women.
Are that this whenever people say, let's just shut it all down, shut down the government, I always feel like somebody needs to show up for the federal workers and say, they'd kind of probably like to eat too. And that's the countervailing issue here. I don't know how long the Democrats will hold out. And how much that they will get in this. To me, I don't see where they can back down. Certainly not over the Fourth Amendment. But personally, I would not back down over the masks or any of it. But there is a countervailing pressure. This is not just we can't keep TSA closed forever because we need it, and we certainly can't keep the Coast Guard closed forever. And again, people like me love the Coast Guard because it protects our waterways, and I need that. That's part of my everyday life. But the Coast Guard also is important for intercepting drugs and all kinds of law enforcement, which is actually why they're in the Department of Homeland Security. So that's where that is now. The administration doesn't want to give that up, and it also doesn't want to give up its detention centers. And it's really important to understand, and we know more about it now, that they intend to build.
Okay, listen up. This scared the crap out of me. I don't know why I didn't know the details, but listen up.
A feeder system of processing areas where people will go people who are being arrested and put into deportation centers will go through the processing centers and then end up in these mega warehouses that will hold up to 10,000 people, which is more than double the size of the largest federal prison that we have right now, where they will be in detention until they are deported. And this does raise the question of, why do we need facilities to imprison this many people if they're going to be deported? And the answer to that, in part, is that people who are in detention are easier to get to give up their rights. That is, at some point, continually told, if you just deported, you'd be out of prison, rather than saying, I'm going to stay here for my asylum case, or I'm going to stay here because of, my paperwork was going through, partly because it is easier to deport people who are in detention. But I maintain that we must think very, very carefully about why they are building and how they are building and what the future is for what they are building of a system of mega detention centers in this country. Because there will come a point when there aren't people that fit the current description.
That's why JE7, that's why I'm scared about it, because why are we building these mega, mega, mega concentration camps? And what happens when we've deported the people they don't like? Then maybe we go after trans, maybe we go after certain women who speak out against the administration. It's just not what the US Constitution was built by design to help us. It really freaks me out.
To put in those. And across the country, you're seeing enormous pushback of people not just saying, we don't want that in our neighborhood, which is what it is being described as, but rather people saying, these are concentration camps, and this is not what America stands for, and this is not how we're going to be doing business. And that also represents enough of a problem for the administration that either yesterday or the day before, I can't remember which. The administration has tried to appear as if it is backing away from its extreme positions, which are basically white nationalism. This idea of the Great Replacement theory, wiping out people of other colors, other backgrounds from the United States of America. They've tried to back away from that by having the acting director of ICE, for example, Todd Lyons, claiming that in fact the agents are trained and that they are only deporting criminals, which we know is simply not true. And you've also seen Trump's advisor, immigration advisor, Tom Homan. They call him a border czar. That's nothing. I could be.
The problem is they're not going after the criminals like they promised. They're just rounding up everyone, even people who have the proper paperwork, people who are going through the right checks and balances that we told them to go through, and they're doing it blindly without training. And that scares me. The lack, again, it's all about the lack of oversight. It involves not just the US, I'll call them executives or, most powerful people in the world. So you've got powerful people internationally, business people. I think she did a great job outlining that it's, political powerful people, business powerful people, and criminals. And that's who is making the decisions.
The czar of my map, right? It's that title doesn't mean anything. He's simply an advisor saying that they are going to be pulling the surge out of Minnesota, out of Minneapolis. And that's really, really fuzzy. And it sounds good, but remember, ICE operates and is always operating around the country. And Homan actually has been a defender, and he's no great moderate, let me tell you, but he has been a defender of ICE institutionally. And the fact that people like Gregory Bovino were using Border Patrol and ICE in extraordinarily violent ways upset people like Homan, who were like, pretty soon the American people are going to turn against ICE altogether. So they're going to pull out the surge gradually, but ICE will continue to remain. So my guess is they're trying to tamp down the violence there, that is to back off on it, but ICE is still going to remain. And I think you got to hold your breath and see what that's actually going to look like. Because again, we've had ICE for a while now, and they do operate. And most of us never see those operations because they are looking for criminals. They're not doing these break all the windows, drag people out, tear gas them, throw flashbangs, yell at them, beat their heads, all the things that you're seeing ICE doing. So they're trying to back off on at least look publicly as if they are backing off on what they are doing. But I think it's really important not to make the mistake of not seeing the larger picture here. If in fact the Trump administration and the cronies in the Trump administration are going to be part of that authoritarianism international, they need to shut the rest of us up. And it's not working. We're getting louder and we're getting better organized, and we're really dramatically pushing back. So if the violence doesn't work,
and again, I appreciate your thoughts, JE7, and they're welcome here. They're absolutely welcome here. I'm not a constitutional expert. I'm not, political expert. I'm not a historian expert. So that's why I'm trusting her. She earned her AB, MA, PhD from Harvard University. She's very factual and respectful. And I love her. I think she's fabulous. And I do think she's not, I would challenge that she's not, that she's correct. I was going to say not incorrect, but that.
I think you're going to see, I'm looking, I always try to tie a whole bunch of stuff together. If the violence doesn't work, you are going to see, and already are seeing, a real uptick in disinformation. There's a lot of that. But you are also seeing in the administration.
And you can definitely disagree. That's what I want. And I actually would love to hear someone counter her, someone with intelligence that's well-schooled. And I love that she's not emotional about it. She's just like, these are the facts. And then she'll talk a little bit about speculation too, which I love. So your comments are respectful and they're welcome here. Don't think that they're not.
Now, a very serious concerted effort to make sure that opponents of the administration can't vote. All right, so today, Kristi Noem is an interesting character because she and Corey Lewandowski.
Okay, here I'm gonna gossip. Kristi Noem is an asshole. She shot her puppy because she didn't want the puppy anymore. She should not be the Secretary of Homeland Security. In my opinion, she is not qualified, and I base that off of the fact that she's not a security expert, a lawyer. She's a politician. She's a career politician. That's what she's done her entire life. I don't like her. This is my speculation and gossip. She was banned by the Native. She's got a lot of negative history. She was banned by the Native American tribes in South Dakota. I have a lot of ethical concerns with her. The whole thing with her daughter didn't pass the real estate license, and then she somehow passed it. That's just, again, I told you there'd be gossip, speculation, and facts. Those are my speculations. Let's hear what Heather has to say about Kristi, who shot her puppy because she didn't want him anymore.
And I've always danced around the issue that it seems pretty widely known that the two of them are having an affair. They're both married to other people, but the Wall Street Journal basically came out and said it yesterday.
Oh, I have to go back. I talked over that. I wanted you to hear that. Let me see. Talking about, okay, wait a minute, hold on.
You are also seeing in the administration now a very serious concerted effort to make sure that opponents of the administration can't vote. All right, so today, Kristi Noem is an interesting character because she and Corey Lewandowski, and I've always danced around the issue that it seems pretty widely known that the two of them are having an affair. They're both married to other people, but the Wall Street Journal basically came out and said it yesterday, so I'm now going to say it as well.
Ew.
The Wall Street Journal and other people have been really going after Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski, who are really the face of these violent federal agents, and they are working very closely, clearly, with Stephen Miller. If you remember when Noem got in trouble earlier, she said, everything I've done at the orders of Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, unelected, or the president. And there is a clear sense now that there is an attempt to put pressure on the administration to get rid of Noem and with her Lewandowski. And you see that in this Wall Street Journal piece of yesterday that is just excoriates both of them.
I love
but
that.
Also makes the point that Lewandowski, who began this whole run of his life as Trump's first campaign manager, which he was not doing at all a good job. That's when the campaign, interestingly enough, one of the people who brings Manafort on is also all over the Epstein files, by the way, a guy named Tom Barrack. But they bring the Lewandowski is not doing, Trump's in real trouble. They bring on Paul Manafort, and Paul Manafort had been a lobbyist, and he's a really interesting figure. I mean, he's sort of the devil incarnate in many ways, but he's a really interesting figure, and he had been working for a Russian oligarch, in addition to a number of other people, really unsavory people, so unsavory that they became known as the torturers lobby. Anyway, they bring on Paul Manafort and push Corey Lewandowski sort of into a side role. Well, Corey Lewandowski, according to this article, really sort of grabbed hold of Kristi Noem as somebody who could be the next face of MAGA. And they really made a point in this article and elsewhere today of suggesting that she is trying, with the help of Corey Lewandowski, to take over Trump's position in the MAGA movement. And of course, that's going to infuriate Trump, who's already not terribly happy with the mistakes that she appears to have made. But if you look and see the way she spoke today in Arizona, she actually spoke in front of a picture of her with Trump, almost as if she was trying to take his place, certainly to suggest that she was a big supporter. But the reason that I'm sort of went down the Corey Lewandowski, Kristi Noem rabbit hole there is because one of the things she did in Arizona was to really push the idea of the Save America Act. Off the top of my head, I suddenly can't remember what SAVE stands for. Maybe somebody can throw it in the chat. Supplemental American Voter Eligibility. No, Security American, I don't know, something like that. The Save America Act is pretty clearly where administration officials are going to try to cut up to 20 million people off the voter rolls. And what this law would do, and mind you, it passed the House on Wednesday, but there isn't a law yet. There's just a bill. So whatever I tell you may not be true if it ever passes in full. But the measure, as it passed the House of Representatives, does a couple of things. First of all, it requires that you have proof of citizenship in order to vote. Now, let me go down another little rabbit hole here. The United States doesn't have a federal system of ID. We're one of the few countries that doesn't. And the reason that we don't is because the states always refuse to give that power up to the federal government. And when Democrats, for example, suggested it would be a very good thing, especially after they passed the Motor Voter Act in 1993, Republicans went bonkers and said, this is
something that caught my ear. I always thought you should show your license. But the SAVE Act goes a step further. And again, it's about limiting the people who maybe aren't supporting the current administration. And that's what they're thinking about. They're worried about November. And my whole reason for coming out and talking is making sure that we're protecting our constitutional rights. You should obviously have to show an ID, but how they're going about it is going to limit specific demographics that they maybe don't want to have the opportunity to vote.
surveillance. This is the government taking over. This is the federal government taking over. We can't have that happen, which is really interesting because now we've actually got under a Republican president, the administration creating this vast database on all of us that we have no control over. So it's interesting to me that the idea of a national ID has not come back up, because in a way that would solve a lot of problems. The United States doesn't have that. So the way that we have tended to protect voting is the states would decide what was a legitimate form of ID. So in a state like Texas, for example, you can use your hunting and fishing license as a voting ID, but you can't use a college ID. And this goes to show you, at least last I checked, I mean, these laws do change, but this goes to show you how IDs can be used to skew for or against.
JE7, I feel like you're too busy typing in the chat and you're not listening, because she's actually answering all of your questions ahead of time. There is definitely a group of voters, and she's talking about college ID right now, who are impacted by the certain requirements that they're put on. So stop typing, take a deep breath. The whole idea of this is just to hear what she has to say. And then you have a live, or you seem to have links, which is fantastic. I'll look at the links. I love opposing views from an articulate, educated person like Heather that has opposing views to facts and data. And I'll certainly listen to that.
To population. Clearly, the people who made that regulation, or that law, I'm sorry, in Texas, assumed the people who were hunting and fishing would vote for their party, and assumed the people who were in college would not vote for their party. And there is, within this attempt to create a federal citizenship requirement, something very sneaky. And that is, the two forms of ID that establish your citizenship are your birth certificate or passport. Well, first of all, a birth certificate is not something that necessarily everybody has their hands on. Frankly, I lose mine a lot. And because for weird reasons, I've needed them lately, I actually do know where I could put my hands on a real birth certificate. And that can't be a photocopy. It has to have a stamp on it. It is expensive to get them, by the way. But in order to do that, you got to know where you were born. And one of the reasons it's a little difficult for me is that I was born in a hospital that now is in 2 different counties. And invariably, when I tried to get my birth certificate, I applied to the wrong county first. And then they send it back and they say, we have no record of you here. And then I go through the other county and then I get my birth certificate. It's not something that people necessarily have. And again, it's expensive to get it. And it's a nuisance, especially for somebody like me who always applies to the wrong county. So not everybody necessarily has birth certificates, but what happens if your birth certificate is not the same name as you currently have? So you changed your name, for example, like when you got married. And that is one way to cut out of the voting population a lot of women. And beginning in 1980, women began to vote for Democrats over Republicans.
That's the problem right there. If your birth certificate doesn't match your license, you wouldn't be able to vote. Mine doesn't match my license. That's the gotcha, right? That's the concern. Also, there are people who can't get their stamped birth certificates for whatever reason, or they don't have the means to do that. You're just eliminating people, and it shouldn't be about eliminating. It should be about extending out to, you want to verify. I'm in cybersecurity. I can make your computer so risk adverse, no one will ever hack you. But then you won't be on the internet.
In higher and higher numbers. And currently, women vote for Democrats in really high numbers compared to Trump, because women do not like Trump. And by the way, people always say except white women. I will point out that your region matters a lot in that case. White women in the South voted for Trump. White women in the North overwhelmingly voted, not overwhelmingly, I think by about 4 points, voted for Kamala Harris in the last election. But certainly women of other populations vote heavily for Democrats. So this argument, first of all, that you need a birth certificate is deeply problematic for women, but also for trans.
LH Traveler, it hasn't passed yet. That's why it hasn't been an issue. This just went in front of Congress, I think Wednesday. So it's a proposed bill, I should have said. It's proposed. And not everyone has a real ID. My kids don't have a real ID. I don't know why I told them to get one. I do have a passport, which, did you know, I didn't know passports was designed so you could passports. I thought that was really interesting when she says that.
Gender people whose whose birth certificate has their dead name, it doesn't have their current name, or for other people who change their names. And people always say, well, what about JD Vance? He's changed his name a lot of times. Yes, but the other thing that you can use is a passport. A passport is a certification of citizenship, and that it covers a lot of people, but passports are expensive. It is expensive, and it takes a lot of time to get a passport. So it's not like you can get a passport with a week's notice. If you tried to do it, I think it's at least 6 weeks and sometimes more than that. So a lot of people are not going to be covered by this SAVE Act, if in fact it goes into effect. But here's the other piece of it. One of the other things the SAVE Act, as it does, or as it's currently written as it passed the House, is it requires the states to purge their voter rolls every month, and it is using a tool that is currently used by the Department of Homeland Security. But that tool that the DHS is using to go through the voter rolls themselves and is turning up what they claim are American or non-citizens voting, in fact, has extremely high rates of false matches. So they're actually saying to people, you've got all these all these non-citizens voting in your states, especially in Missouri and Texas. And the people go and look, and they're like, what are you talking about? These people are citizens. Often they're naturalized citizens, but they're as much a citizen as I am. And I was born here, and my family's been here for a gazillion years. So they're trying to purge these rolls. Now, before you get upset about the SAVE Act, as you should be, by the way, it has not passed the Senate. And right now it doesn't even have a majority vote in the Senate. That is, it's not being held back simply by Democrats who aren't behind it. Even Republicans don't like the idea of the federal government taking over the requirements for the elections, not least because for federal elections, not least because the Constitution is quite explicit that this power belongs to the states. And members of states don't generally like to give up their power to the federal government because they're defending their states, as they should be. Although this group of MAGA Republicans has been frighteningly likely to give up their power to the states. So, I'm sorry, to the federal government. The states have given up their power to the federal government far more often, I think, than they should have. And I've talked to you a lot about that. You know what? I'm going to go back to this issue, but just because people say they like my rabbit holes, I will throw in here this issue of federal citizenship and having a birth certificate or some kind of passport is actually really important to American history, especially to Black history, because one of the ways that Black Americans could escape enslavement in the American South was by using papers, citizenship papers from the federal government, simply by virtue of the fact that they didn't have photographs in those days. And so you could describe yourself to the federal government to say you were a U.S. citizen in order to be aboard ship. And you could use those papers, not exactly interchangeably, but you could use citizenship papers that were signed by the Department of State, for example, or free papers that were signed to enable you to pass among ports. And that's actually how Frederick Douglass gets out of enslavement in Maryland. And this is a bit of a spoiler, he does mention it in his third autobiography, is another sailor, he's actually working in the maritime trades, another sailor lets him use his passport papers, the papers that will let him pass ports in order for mariners to be able to go from one port to another. Or as I say, you could also have federal citizenship papers. Those are slightly different things. Those are used internationally, but those become a way for enslaved Americans to be able to get out of enslavement. And when Frederick Douglass does that, when he uses those papers, he's actually aboard ship. And he's a striking looking man if you know what he looks like. And he is trying to hide his face, because if somebody recognizes him, they can say, these are not your papers. And then he's in serious trouble. He's going to be in I just can't even begin to describe the trouble he's going to be in. And he looks up at one point, and a man catches his eye, and he thinks, I'm done for. And the man is an abolitionist, and he looks away. It's a really powerful moment. Anyway, that idea of belonging to a nation and having rights because you belong to a nation is a really important one, as I say, especially for Black history. And I wanted to mention it today because, of course, we are in Black History Month, but also because tomorrow is the day that Frederick Douglass claimed as his birthday, because coming from enslavement, he didn't know the exact date of his birthday, so he always claimed February 14th. And I thought a shout out to Frederick Douglass was in order. All right. But this idea of trying to insist on a certain kind of federal identification in order to register to vote is brand new. And the MAGA people would like to get it through Congress. But so far, the Senate does not look as if it wants to do that. And so, as of this afternoon, we got this from President Donald Trump in his social media account, an account that, as you know, I maintain is not always written by him. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But this afternoon, the social media account of the President of the United States said, this quote, I'm reading it as best I can without my glasses. The Democrats refuse to vote for voter ID or citizenship. The reason is very simple. They want to continue to cheat in elections. Now, remember, this idea that undocumented people vote in elections began in 1994 after the Motor Voter Act. There has never been any evidence for it. Never. All right. The reason is very simple. They want to continue to cheat in elections, he said. This was not what our founders desired. And this I find fascinating because, in fact, we didn't really have a concept of what was a citizen in the early days of voting because we barely had an idea of what was a nation. We don't actually get real definitions of citizenship until after the U.S. Civil War, which itself would be an interesting conversation that I don't have time for now. This was not what I'm sorry, one last thing. Hamilton was not born in the United States, just FYI. So when you hear this, it's like you got to kind of think of Hamilton as one of the founders, and he was not born in the United States. This was not what our founders desired. I have searched the depths of legal arguments not yet articulated or vetted on this subject. Who knew? And I will be presenting an irrefutable one in the very near future. There will be voter ID for the midterm elections, whether approved by Congress or not. Also, the people of our country are insisting on citizenship and no mail-in ballots, with exceptions for military, disability, illness, or travel. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, I just want to highlight that in this moment because that statement is doing a number of things. I think, first of all, it is declaring that Donald Trump is a dictator. That is, the Constitution is crystal clear that it is only the Congress of the United States, the legislative branch, that can make law. And this has never been contested. Executive orders are not laws. They are sort of instructions of a boss to the people working for him how to move the mission of the organization forward under the laws that are established by Congress. So he's saying whether Congress passes a law or not, whether approved by Congress or not, he is going to institute this voter ID. It is also his declaration that he knows what the founders desired, which, by the way, there is absolutely no way that he or anybody with him has plumbed the depths of legal arguments not yet articulated or vetted on this subject. I'm a little bit of an expert, by the way, on this, and I will tell you, these new arguments, sort of reworking birthright citizenship, for example, or trying to suggest that the framers had a different idea about citizenship than we have understood, are completely crap. I mean, there's my word for it. And I think you're also seeing here his recognition that the American people do not want to join authoritarianism international. And he is throwing his chips in on this idea that he is going to take over the United States of America by taking over voting. The election's going to be held, but he's going to make sure that he's the only person, he and his people are the only ones who get to determine what is a fair vote. And this is it. I mean, this is what we are going to be fighting now between now and the November elections, because those people who keep saying, oh, well, he's so unpopular, we're going to win because, we have all the numbers, which is 100% true. People have turned on Donald Trump. His numbers are in the toilet. All the people who put him over the top in 2024 have turned to him, some by as much as 50% of their vote. These are all deadly numbers for somebody who's actually going to abide by what the American people want. But he has just announced to us that he is not going to do that. So waiting until this vote happens is far too late. This is our struggle going forward now, is to make sure that the SAVE Act doesn't go through, but also that we harden the spines of our elected officials to push back on this, whether it means continuing to hack away at Kristi Noem, at Russell Vode, the Office of Management and Budget, who has been decimating our government. If it means, getting rid of Stephen Miller, whatever it takes to weaken this administration such that it cannot skew these the voting in 2026, now is the time to do that, is to recognize we cannot wait until November. Although November is very important, and you should make sure you have a birth certificate and that everybody in your family does that matches your name now, or that you have a passport. Now is the time to do that, and that all your friends have passports. All those things are very important, and there are organizations working to make that happen. Now we must keep up the pressure that has pushed back on ICE, that has pushed back on Border Patrol, that has forced Congress really to ignore Trump's 2026 budget and write their own, that has in so many ways said, you're not going to get away with turning us into authoritarianism international. This is the place and the time for us to do that now. And you always want me to talk about the monks. I was in Washington when the monks were. I somehow just kept missing them. Their example that has been mirrored so brilliantly around the country in places like Minneapolis, that the way we do this is by reinforcing neighborliness and caring for each other and democracy at home, locally, as well as at the state level and at the national level, is the way that we push back on that. And by constantly calling and writing to our electeds, not only the ones who are in power, but the ones who want to be in power, so that they recognize that they can build, there's got to be something in it for them, that they can build a political career on voicing the things that we care about, or they can retain their political career by voicing that. This is the time to do that. And now, especially as people are starting to think about office, right now, I think it was yesterday, Susan Collins announced that she would run for another term in the Senate from Maine. She's extremely vulnerable. Pushing hard on her, whether you're from Maine or not, is going to be a very effective way to use your power. So let's dig in on that if you care about these issues, and continue to do what we're doing, because I think we're really seeing this moment in American history crystallizing into the attempt of Trump and those who are using him and using his position, because it's not monolithic. There's about 4 different groups. You're seeing this moment in which they are making their play to cement control over the United States of America, and the vast majority of us who don't want to be part of a world in which what we do and what we create is leveraged by a very few elites in order to enrich themselves and give themselves more power, so they can do things like they have done to the survivors of Epstein's sexual assaults and sex trafficking. This is the moment for us to make sure that the United States does not fall into that trap. It's just something that occurred to me. I forgot to talk to you about Bondi, whom you asked me to, but I'm already at an hour, so I'm going to save that for another day. I'm sorry about
Bondi, she's another one. But anyway, so thank you. We did it. We had a respectful conversation. And I think I saw side-eye just saying, what's wrong with I actually think we should have documentation. The part that irked me was that your birth certificate has to match your ID, because that eliminates 60% of all the women who are married that have changed their names. So 60%, 70% of the population. It just seemed like that's not right. Like, we shouldn't be doing that. I do think you should show. I don't know what that documentation is, but I'm not opposed to that. That, when she was talking about the majority of us are impacted, she's talking the majority of both parties, right? And that's what that just struck a chord with me, that it's really the extremists versus the rest of us that's bothersome. So that was fun, and I appreciate it. I like that you posed a question. What would work? Yeah, what would work? Real IDs. I mean, to me, everyone in my family has a passport, so it wouldn't be an issue. I always worry about people that that aren't like me. I try to represent those who can't be represented at the table. So not everyone does have the passport or the birth certificate that matches. So I just want to make sure we're including all demographics when we talk about it. So it was a great education. I love her. I think she's brilliant. Subscribe to her for newsletters. Even if it's not aligns with politics, isn't it great to have a history lesson? Because she's brilliant. And she does teach about, again, it's facts. I've never found her to go off script or be wrong, quite frankly. And I don't always align with everything she says, but I find that she's credible. So I don't know where my marriage certificate is. Should I have that? I guess I should have that. I have no idea where my marriage certificate is, but I do have my passport and I have my license, so hopefully that wouldn't be too much of an issue. But we had a political discussion, and it's funny, I didn't even wanna say I'm doing a political show because 'cause I'm not a politician. I don't actually feel qualified, but I am really good at finding people who can who are smart and who I trust and who have data. So, I'm doing the same thing for the Epstein. I have an attorney who I have to finish listening to it. Let's transition. Let's pause for a minute. Let's just pause. Agree, Cyberchick. The birth certificates matching the real ID is a problem for those who marry. Yeah, that's all. I just want it to be, oh, look at Cyberchick's sister. I ordered a marriage certificate for $124. Where do you even order that from? A town hall that you got married in? I guess, my husband probably has it. He probably has. I don't know where anything is. Took 8 to 12 weeks. Hi, Sister Lynn. How are you? I miss you. Come to the casino tonight. Why won't you come with us? We're gonna have fun. Um, let's see what Ocean Beach app has to say. Leaving whole immigration issue out of this. It's the move to ID all US citizens and tracking through cameras that are recording us now for facial, yeah, and how it can be misused. You know what it comes down to, honestly? I have to have trust in people in power. The Epstein files are atrocious. There was a so forget about what actually I mean, the victims, my heart goes out to the victims. I'm not even gonna go there and talk about well, I am gonna talk about how they were, victimized over and over again by people in power. What's striking about the Epstein, situation is the vast and unbelievable cover-up at so many different levels, just like Heather outlined, politicians, business people, and criminals. And the fact that there are journalists out there that say, "I'm done with the Epstein files." Bullshit. We've just started. That is another attempt to cover it up. You have to talk about it. You have to expose it. What they did is um, criminal, disgusting, and again, it goes across both political lines and powerful business leaders. And why should they get a pass? It's not done. It's really interesting. Um, so I hope that was painless. Oh, it's Kristen. My marriage certificate is from Jamaica. Hope it's valid. I don't know what to say. Is there a stamp on it? Funeral lady. I'm just going back reading some of these. 80% of the people don't pay attention to town or city resources, but they would if there was more accessible outreach. You can get marriage certificate easily from wherever you originally registered. Again, that'll be up to John to decide. I don't think I need it though. I don't know. Um, so thank you. Thank you for joining my TED Talk on politics. And really, what I want to do is remind everyone of the US Constitution, what role the government plays. I don't think that I think sometimes we forget why we have the Constitution and why it's so important and why we need to protect it. Now, let's talk about tattoos. I want a tattoo. Any sisters out there want to go with me for a tattoo? Lisa already signed up. Of course, I gave Lisa a wrench and she's never in my chat. She's so funny. Sisters out there, we're transitioning. We're transitioning off politics into tattoos. My hairdresser found a good tattoo artist for me because the one that I went to, who I love dearly, died of cancer. She died of leukemia. Isn't that sad? I went to her 3 times, and it's hard to for me, it's hard to trust someone. She has to be an artist, she has to be meticulous, but yes, today is casino day. Oh, wait a minute, hold on, got spicy. So my niece will go, LOL. Get your mom to do it, Liz. Sister Lynn is anti-tats. That's shocking. Maybe we should do a sister night and we just all go get tattoos. Yes, today is casino day. It's starting tonight. So we're going to the casino. We're very excited about it. I do hope that it's only the beginning, and I can only hope people will take off their blinders and realize this Epstein thing is not about red or blue. Yeah, it's about powerful people. I've got a lot to say about it, and I have a very intelligent person, just like Heather was, to walk us through it. And actually, it's been really. eh, I didn't want to listen to it, and then I just thought that's the problem. So this has been the week of risks for me. I didn't want to do a live Friday, and I did one. I was worried about having a political show, and I did one. And now we're going to dive into the Epstein files, and we're not going to talk about the scandalous details. We're going to talk about it from a factual point of view, and it's an eye opening. It is. LA Traveler likes tattoos. Um, yeah, Auntie Lynn is so against tattoos. It's dangerous. Okay, what time is it? 2:20. So we've had fun. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing this. It was a risk. I was worried, but I think if we can just open up our minds and have a have a dialogue about it, we won't all agree, but if we can make valid points on both sides with facts and data, always bring to the table facts and data. And then for the hell of it, we'll do a little speculation. We'll have a little bit of fun. I mean, it is Sunday afternoon. Um, Cyberchick, I will so go with you to get a tattoo. We got to go quick. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you for listening to Heather, and stay tuned for the Epstein files coming shortly. Have a great day.